Welcome to our home. We are absolutely giddy to have you with us as we continue to study the Doctrine and Covenants. Today we are studying sections 71 to 75. We're looking specifically at three topics: Confounding Your Enemies, the Will of the Lord, and Labor Ye in My Vineyard. We suggest that you get your scriptures out, your pens, papers, journals, whatever it is for you, your phones, your computers, so that you can have an incredible study of the scriptures today. We know that the Lord is going to guide you and teach you those things that are most important. Welcome to Grounded, where women and men of all ages, nationalities, and backgrounds gather together with me, Barbara Morgan Gardner, and my guests as we strive to gain a bedrock understanding of the life and teachings of Jesus Christ and become more like him. Today, we have our wonderful friend with us, Shima Baughman. Shima, how are you today?
I'm so good. I'm so happy to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us at our table.
Yes,
so
it's
nice
awesome to be in your home. It's beautiful.
Shima, we have this podcast at our table for a few reasons, and I love this about you. You're a professor in the law school, and I want people to see that as women, we are also intricately a part of and put a priority into our homes.
Absolutely.
This is why we want to be here at the table in our home having this podcast. So thank you for joining us in our home today.
Yes, I love it.
I love that.
If only our kids were with us. That would be complete.
Today they're at school. That's okay.
Yes,
One of these days,
true.
our children will hang out with us again.
That's true.
So Shima, we have a bio on you that I would love to talk about. But before we get into your actual professional bio, would you tell us a little bit more about you as a disciple of Christ?
Oh, that's great. I grew up in Iran, where I never would have been introduced to the gospel. I have no business being in Utah right now, but for the will of the Lord.
Why Iran? Tell us Iran.
So I was born in Iran. I lived there until I was 7 through some miraculous circumstances. So my mom was actually a political prisoner when I was being raised for 2.5 years. She was supposed to serve for 10 years, but my dad was a neurosurgeon, helped her get out early of her sentence, and his sister was also in prison for fighting against kind of a totalitarian regime and that didn't allow for freedom of religion or speech. Wow. And so those issues are kind of near and dear to my heart. But anyway, I grew up, I finished first grade in Iran, and then we had this amazing opportunity to go to UCLA. And that's where we found the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Changed our lives because we were supposed to go back after a year. We decided to stay there in LA first, and then we moved around quite a bit. I grew up mostly in New York. And that's where kind of throughout you look at like journals, my first journal was when I was 8, and at church they told me keep a journal, and all that's written about it is just how important the church was. And it's like, we're having a church activity today, or today was my baptism day. I mean, these are the things I decided that were so important to me because it was just life-changing for us to come to America and join the church.
Shima, it honestly reminds me a little bit of my own daughter, Allie, not coming from any type of background as far as that, but coming into a family and having the church and recognizing the importance of temples and baptism and covenants and things like that, where it changes you.
It does.
And I love that you just were writing the most important things down in your journal.
It's funny because I'd never seen it that way. I look back now and I'm like, all I wrote about was the gospel and the church and the community that we created, because it really changed our lives because people just took us in a way that was unhuman, right? Like my mom had never seen this, and she's like, these must be disciples of Christ, just the way they treated us. And just the help they gave us. They brought us to become part of their families. Like my sister and I as young women were invited to places like, we were awkward. No one was friends with us at school, but at church we fit in. And so for us, it was just like, we felt like home. Like here, I feel home.
Well, you are home.
Oh,
you really are home. You're always welcome here.
Yeah.
You're bringing up a point that I think is actually extremely important. Sometimes when we live among members of the church for years, or we live in a safe community, or whatever it is that we are surrounded by, we start taking it for granted.
Yeah.
And what you're explaining there to me is one of the most beautiful realities. It's when you don't have it.
Yeah.
When you don't have the family proclamation, for example.
Right.
You're grateful for it. Thank you so much for helping us have an eternal family, right? When you don't have an understanding of the atonement of Jesus Christ, and all of a sudden you learn about it. I remember on my mission, which I served in LA, over there at UCLA. Yeah, isn't that great?
Wow.
I remember talking to this one young man and teaching him one night about Jesus Christ. He was probably 14 or 15. And I remember him saying, what did they do to him?
Wow.
And we said, well, they crucified him. And he was like, what? he was so mad. The one man that did so much and they killed it. Like
it's devastating.
Yes. And so what you're explaining, and I really appreciate you expressing this to us, is when you found the truth, you were so grateful for it.
The fact that you brought up that mission and just like the kind of unfamiliarity of people with the gospel. Like I remember, so my mom was in prison. She had a dream that she knew she was in a plane and she was over America, and she's in prison at this time. She's like, how am I having this dream? Like, how am I going to be in America? And then soon, right, God fulfills his work. She's in America, finds the gospel, and she knows immediately. And the way she knows is there's a pamphlet at this beautiful woman named Mariam's house. She's in LA. Did you know Mariam when you were in LA?
I think I did.
I feel like everyone knows Mariam.
Yes.
She is the best missionary you'll ever meet.
Okay.
And she was there. Anyway, everyone in LA knows her. But she had this pamphlet called Families Can Be Together Forever. Do you remember the church had those?
Yes.
You probably had them on your mission.
Absolutely.
And my mom read the whole thing in the back. There was something about missionaries, and she just goes, I want to hear more, because that resonated with her. Like she knew this was something that was going to change her life and our lives. And I think of like now our posterity's lives. It's just incredible, the blessing of the gospel that we take for granted. And I try not to ever, I love to talk about my conversion story, my mom's, because I just feel like we can take it for granted. When you're just like, you, Todd, you're like, no, like, I don't belong here. Like, I never should have been here, except for the fact that, somebody opened their mouth. And I know we're going to get to that. But just proclaiming the gospel.
Oh, Shima, thank you. And people desperately want the gospel of Jesus Christ. There are people searching for it. Goodness, I so appreciate your openness with that. If we could help all people, whether members of the church or not, to recognize that we have the most beautiful truth on the earth, and this is giving us the greatest joy, and there's a reason we are doing what we're doing, right? This is what matters most.
Absolutely.
Shima, a little bit about you. I'm just going to actually read a couple of these things because it's so great, and then I want you to fill it in. I'm not going to read all of it, but one thing that stood out to me is you were number one in your in your law class at BYU. Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's awesome. And then I love this, that you clerked for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. And you practiced law at Kirkland and Ellis in New York.
Yes.
Served as a Fulbright scholar.
Yes.
I mean, this is absolutely incredible. And you're currently the Woodruff J. Dean Professor of Law at BYU in the J. Reuben Clark Law School.
Yes. And then also a fellow in the Wheatley Institute as well, doing the religion work.
Shima, thank you. Thank you for this devoted life. So I hope we say things like this. This is a part of your discipleship.
Yeah.
This is not a person who is Christian one day, Latter-day Saint another day, another minute you're a mother of your beautiful 5 children, and another day you're doing. This is you.
Right.
This is who you are as a disciple of Jesus Christ. All of this put together into one person.
Absolutely. And I think of my kids, like when you're just saying that, a disciple of Christ, like my kids get to be disciples of Christ because of the opportunities, because of the hand of the Lord that led my family here. And it's such a blessing to see that, right? And just have the kids be able to learn things before I ever did about Jesus Christ and about his restored gospel and the Book of Mormon. And it's so beautiful.
It is beautiful. Thank you, Shima. We're going to talk a little bit more about your life and some of the stories that you have as we continue on here. Let's jump into our first topic.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yes.
So again, we're studying sections 71 to 75, and let's start here with section 71.
Yes.
Want to give us some background?
I love it. So, okay, section 71 is super interesting because you have kind of a case study of 2 members of the church, Ezra Booth and Isaac Morley. And they both kind of joined the church around the same time. Both have very deep testimonies of the gospel at first. And they are sent on a mission right away, as they all were, right? It's like you join your bishop, and so they get sent on a mission, and it's under like hard circumstances, as most missionaries serve, right? Where they're walking on their mission, it's hot, and they see Joseph Smith, in a carriage, and his wife had just lost twins. I mean, they're going through a lot of stuff too. But anyway, so Ezra Booth becomes upset by this, right? He doesn't feel like his mission it goes as well as he wanted to, right? He shows up in Missouri, and there's 7 members. They kind of thought there was a big establishment. There wasn't.
He thought he was going to Zion, didn't know he had to create it.
He had to create it. And it's like, oh, okay, this is different than he signed up for. And then Isaac Morley, who's basically joins around the same time, has the same exact experience, but then their trajectories take them so differently. And Ezra Booth, of course, ends up, kind of quitting after his mission, basically, and then becoming an advocate against the church and really talking as negatively as he could in those surrounding communities against the church. And then 71 and 73, are really discussing, okay, what do the saints do in response? What does the Lord tell them to do when someone is spreading falsehoods about the church. And I think, it's a really important section because I think we can relate as women, as men too, but we all have had this situation, right? Where people have spread falsehoods about us. And so how do we deal with it? And I love this instruction here and some of the other words that Christ has said about these things. So I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, we're seeing this, as you just said, this mission call in section 71. And he's telling them, open your mouths, labor in our vineyard, help people understand. And then in verse 7, wherefore confound your enemies, call upon them to meet you both in public and in private.
Right.
And inasmuch as you are faithful, their shame shall be made manifest. So we're seeing this right off the bat, as Joseph and Sydney are being told, now look, we do have a problem here.
Yep.
You do have some enemies out there, and especially those who are internal enemies, right?
Yes.
And he's saying you need to confound them. In this case, you actually do need to go do something about it.
Absolutely. What really kind of has touched me on this is the no weapon that is formed against you shall prosper. When you have a good heart and you're trying to do the will of the Lord, no negative thing that's said about you is ever going to prosper. And this happens with the church, of course, because look at this tiny church, and now we have 17.5 million members all across the world. None of this little harm back in the day that might have seemed so insurmountable has ever harmed them. And I think this is true in our lives as well. I remember right after law school, I worked for a judge on the Ninth Circuit, as you said, Judge Jay Bybee, and he's an incredible member of the church. And I was so excited to clerk for him. But as soon as I found out, basically right after I accepted the clerkship, he was the head of the Office of Legal Counsel for the Bush administration.
Wow.
And what happened was right after we all accepted our clerkship, the torture memo scandal broke. I don't know if you remember that whole thing.
That.
Okay,
but explain it for our listeners.
I'll explain it. Yeah, a lot of people won't.
Please.
What happened was basically during the period right after 9/11, there were some worries that there was people that were going to basically orchestrate another 9/11 that killed thousands of people. So 9/11 killed over 3,000 people in New York. And so my judge was the head of Office of Legal Counsel, and the Department of Defense sent him this memo saying, would you support some of these advanced interrogation techniques so that we could get information that wouldn't permanently harm these people, but would kind of scare them and really, kind of make them think that they're being permanently harmed. And he basically, John, you authored it, but Judge Jay Bybee had signed it. And after these years, the years after it comes out, everyone's kind of post 9/11, we're not as worried anymore. And they're just like, this is horrendous.
Yes.
He's a torturer. And it really taught me kind of like, okay, what do I believe, right? Do I believe this? Like, I see him as a man, he's, serves in the church. He has an amazing family, treats us all like gold. Or do I believe what's in the news? And of course, I believe that the person I saw and met. And it really taught me, like, you can't really believe everything that you read about people. I mean, even from every single source was telling us he's a horrible person. And we saw, no, he wasn't. And it just really made me question what I read about anybody and just try to give them the benefit of the doubt because, when people are good, and since this point, right, at the time it was hard. None of the judges it was just hard for him as a Ninth Circuit judge. But over the years, he's befriended every single judge, left and right. Wow. And he's written in the Yale Law Journal, which is the best law journal we have in the legal profession. So, and had amazing clerks from all over. So I just see no weapon has prospered against him, right? Even though there was a time where people were protesting when we were hearing cases like, who is this torturer? Get him off the court. And now you look at his life and he's, had a remarkable career. And now he's a, kind of retired judge. He still works a little bit. But anyway, I just think there's so much power in that.
There is. And Shima, one of the things you just mentioned that I love that you did is you did see and read all this material that people were saying. And there's one thing that I have learned throughout my life, but even more so recently, is pay attention to the sources, right? And pay attention also to whether it's a person or whether it's a newspaper, but also pay attention to the Spirit, pay attention to the Lord. I've been surprised at myself sometimes where I'll hear somebody say something negative and I think, oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. And then I have to catch myself and say, no, and I don't know that.
I don't know that.
I don't know that.
True.
I didn't and I don't, right?
That's right.
That's somebody's opinion, somebody's
That's
experience.
Right.
It's not mine.
It's not mine.
And be as we've heard in General Conference, be a stone catcher instead of a stone thrower.
Oh, I love it.
But that's what you've done, right? Even for this man's name.
I try to.
And you've done it for many people on multiple levels, especially
and I know, and
I
first saw it with my judge, and then in my own life, I then experienced the same thing where untruths were said about me broadly, and So I really feel that's so important to just like try not to judge, first of all. And if you do, just find out for yourself, right? Like see that person's fruits, see what you can see. And I think, the other thought I had was I kind of feel now the sadness and the kind of like anger that the saints might have had when Ezra Booth. So I'll tell you what happened. Last week, I was at an interfaith conference, and it's actually a really beautiful conference. It's bringing all these faiths together, including the Latter-day Saints, which, out of 300 people, there's 30 at Latter-day Saints, which is incredible.
Yeah.
They're like, we're invited, and I was asked to speak, and there's another LDS person asked to speak, so I was very excited to be there. But I remember there was this kind of, one of the sessions, basically, one of the speakers said some negative things about our church that were untrue in relations that we have with our LGBT youth. And, I knew those things were untrue, and it was a kind of unfair characterization of our faith. And I was so like, what do we do? And I luckily had been studying this, right? Because we had just studied. And I was like, what do I do? And honestly, in times of my life, I would have just sat silent and been like, you know what? It's okay. Because yes, like no weapon will prosper. But the Lord tells them specifically, they need to, what did he say? Call upon them to meet you both in public and in private. And as much as you're faithful, their shame shall be made manifest. It's like I felt emboldened. And what I did after this talk, I went to the CEO of the conference and I talked to him and I said, look, are we invited here as LDS or are we not? Like, I was joking with him and he was laughing and he's like, I'm so sorry that your faith is discriminated against. Like, it's kind of one of the last faiths that we can discriminate against.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, and it's because sometimes we turn the other cheek, and we should turn the other cheek, but we also should defend.
Yes.
And
yes.
I love this section because it's like we also can defend, and we can speak in public and private. And so I talked to him. I spoke to the two people that said things that I felt like weren't quite fair for our faith, and so I felt like emboldened. Like we can also speak up and defend our faith in a kind, non-adversarial, peacemaking way. I actually called it peacemaking. I was like, I talked to some of the LDS folks, and I wanted to make sure I was right after I heard these comments. And I was like, did I perceive this right? And they were like, yes. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go do some peacemaking. And I went and talked to those people, because you have to, if you don't call it out, and actually the people were so lovely that I spoke to. The woman was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't intend it. She's like, I actually love your church. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad you love the church. It didn't come out that way in your comments, but like, let's figure. And so anyway, I just feel like it goes well. It can go well. And sometimes even if it doesn't go well, like we need to speak.
Well, even in verse 8, the same thing. It says, wherefore let them bring forth their strong reasoning against the Lord. I mean, they're going to bring forth their strong reasoning. Yes. And let's bring forth our strong reasoning. And let's be peacemakers. Sometimes I think we may think that peacemaking means we don't disagree. We can disagree. It's how we learn to disagree that makes all the difference, right?
Yes.
It's difficult to be a peacemaker if you're not willing to go into a conversation sometimes, right?
Yes.
And so this is, the Lord is actually asking them to go into this conversation. And sometimes there may be times when it is okay to keep silent. I'm going to leave that between the person and the Lord, right?
There is times. I felt that myself. Yeah. I've been prompted to stay silent sometimes.
And speak, me too. And I've also felt prompted to speak up.
That's right.
In this case, it says in public and in private. I'm just wondering with you, Shima, give us an idea of, from your experience, when do you speak privately? When do you speak publicly? What do you see with that?
I know. I think it's a matter of prayer and like using the Spirit to guide you. And I think if I'm ever motivated by like defensiveness or pride, I watch that. But as I thought about this situation I just told you about, the most recent time I was like triggered about something, wanting to defend the faith, I was like, okay, is my defensiveness pride, or is it just trying to set the truth straight?
Right.
Which is what they're doing in this section. They're just trying to proclaim. And they're like, God, I mean, Jesus Christ tells them, I'm sure God's on this too, in on it. But he's just like, okay, stop translating. It's that important that they then have to just set the record straight.
And you know what? I think it's so important that they do set this record straight at this time. The church is just beginning still. I mean, we look at this and say, we're in section 71 now, so we're halfway through almost this Doctrine and Covenants. But the church is just beginning. The name of the church, the association with the church, the leaders of the church. And here you have this Ezra Booth. I mean, it says in here in the section heading, it says, as a result of the publications of letters written by Ezra Booth, who apostatized, the brethren were to go forth and preach. Ezra Booth he wasn't just a negative person. He wrote letters to the Ohio Star. This is a public journal, right? And this is what Joseph Smith's cousin, George Albert Smith, says about this. He says, While he, meaning Ezra Booth, was in apostasy, he searched his cranium for some means to justify himself and published a series of lying letters. I mean, he really was doing this, and he was very intentional and was very hurtful for the church at that time. I personally believe that had Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon not taken the opportunity to do what the Lord had asked them to do, it could have done even more damage in the future.
Right.
We're already going to be struggling, but in this case, at least they knew what they stood for.
And I love that, because it's like, and then I read this, and then I go to this conference, and I'm thinking, okay, there's 300 people here, a lot of faith leaders. And if I don't correct this, and I actually spoke on my panel, and I corrected in a nice way.
Oh, that's awesome.
I tried to do, the damage control I could, but it's like, it's impactful when people spread lies that have been part of the church, right?
Yeah.
And so I just love this story of, like, we can speak up. We don't have to always just, turning the other cheek doesn't mean not speaking up.
There are some individuals who really, really struggle to defend the faith, to say something because it makes them feel uncomfortable and things. What are some thoughts or just some ideas that you can give to people just to help them kind of speak up and speak out, defend the faith, or teach the truth? Especially when it's an uncomfortable feel for people.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think on that?
It's really hard, and I think defending anything when everyone's piling on or others are, I think it's a difficult situation. For me, my constant thought is like, okay, this gospel though brings me so much joy.
Yes.
And Jesus Christ has saved me, so it's my duty to kind of speak up and to defend it, because I'm nowhere without the gospel of Jesus Christ, without the church. And so I don't know. It's like a natural inclination. Like why I got more fired up. I can't even remember the last time I got so fired up. It's almost like someone had insulted my husband or my kids. I was so fired up because I'm like, I love this church, and we are kind and good people, and the vast majority of people I've met, and I've met a lot of them. I've lived all over the country and the world, are just good people trying their best. And I know that there's some of us that make mistakes, and I do too. I'm definitely not perfect, but I think that there's so much, and I think the thing I wanted to talk about after too is okay, we need to speak our truth, but then we can't hold this kind of hatred in our hearts.
Yes.
And we have to let it go. And you can't then curse Ezra Booth to death. And I actually wanted to share something beautiful. I have this dear friend of mine in my ward, and she's been through a divorce, and I have too. And so she didn't even realize that we had this in common when she gave this book to me. It's called Meditations Rooted in Christ, Deanne Sadler. Oh, it's so good. It's basically meditations rooted in Christ.
Yeah, that's great.
And I love that, because there's not a ton of that out there. There's meditations, and so she says, I met my guide on the dock, she says, and I asked him, do you know how to mend a broken heart? Because you think of how painful it is to hear negative things about you or your family or your kids or whatever it is. And he smiled and answers, that's what I do. May I? And I'm like, oh, Jesus. I nodded my consent. He then reached into my chest cavity and pulled out my heart. It was very black and misshapen. He walked to the edge of the dock and began to squeeze my heart. A black ink-like substance squirted out, covering his hands and up his arms. He bent down, rinsing the black ink from his hands into the water of the bay. He squeezed my heart over and over again, and each time he rinsed his hands, I realized the ink was burning his flesh, causing him excruciating pain. He continued the process until there was no more ink left. My heart had returned to its normal shape and was no longer black, but was bright and healthy. He then tenderly kissed my heart and placed it back in my chest. There, he said, I can do that whenever you need it. And I'm like, oh,
wow.
My heart, because it's that is what he does, right? Whether it's people speaking unkindly about you or treating you unkindly or, whatever, all the things she went through. She talks about her divorce in this book of just the betrayals that she went through. And I'm like, that is what Jesus Christ does to our hearts, right? Anytime you feel getting a little black inside, right? He'll wring it out. And he's been through the pain of doing that already. He's not suffering again for it. He's already done it.
Recently, we had one of our elementary school friends of one of my daughters was tragically killed in a car accident. He was going home from school, and I went to the funeral, and it was the most beautiful experience, Shima. This father was one of the concluding speakers. All of the siblings had spoken, and the mother spoken, and the father, and he was very emotional, and he talked about the anger, just somebody has to pay for this.
Right.
Somebody has to suffer. Somebody has to bring my son back. Somebody has to. And he just said, he was just so angry.
Yeah.
And just trying to find some way. He said it was like the anger, this is my interpretation of it, it was like the anger I had to cover my pain, so it just becoming angry. And somebody, there had to be some type of justice, right? And he said, and he was just crying and mad. And he said, finally, he realized it wasn't going to happen. His son wasn't coming back. The anger wasn't going to solve anything, right? But it was so real and so like
and
vulnerable.
us having kids that age, like we can feel that. Like I have an 8-year-old, and you have a
9-year-old.
Your 9-year-old, and it's like.
And as
real.
Shima, I don't know that there was a dry eye in there, because I think everyone in that room, at least me, I was thinking, that's me.
I would feel
that's how I would be.
And I feel it for you.
Yes, and we felt it for him.
Felt it for him.
The beautiful picture of his son is on the programs and on the screen, but then he just taught one of the most beautiful truths. He said, I ask everyone in this audience to please let it go. He said, and I recognize that not everyone is going to necessarily agree or have this experience that this father had, but he said, it took the loss of my son to understand the healing of the atonement of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
And he said, I wish it wouldn't have.
Wow.
But because of this loss, I understand now what Jesus Christ did for me. And he took it from there to when Jesus Christ bore our stripes and suffered death and all of this, he said, he was healing my heart.
Wow.
And it was interesting. He didn't say he was taking on all of the sins of this person who had, hit my son. He wasn't saying that he had suffered for all of that man's sins or transgressions, whatever it was. There was no mention of that. It was just simply, the Savior healed my heart.
Oh,
it was the most beautiful moment.
And this is what you need. It's like, I'm sure Joseph Smith needed that. I think sometimes we're hard on ourselves when we do feel hatred or our hearts turn black or we get angry, right? Like however you want to visualize it. But like just remembering that he's always there, like as Deanne would say, on the dock, like he's just there waiting for, like, this is what I do, he says.
Yes.
This is what he does. This is what he does. Right?
It is exactly what he does. That's his purpose, right?
It's what he's here for. And I just love that so much. I constantly need to go back, right? I mean, every day there's something, I'm like, help me to feel love when I don't, or, when I'm feeling something different.
Yes.
And we always have these different emotions besides love. And anyway.
Alma 37 is just a scripture that's come to my mind when you're talking about this and putting it on the Lord and him taking our heart, right? Yeah. Verse 36, he says, and it's a familiar scripture to many, cry unto God for all thy support. Let all thy doings be unto the Lord. Whithersoever thou goest, let it be in the Lord. Let all thy thoughts be directed unto the Lord. Yea, let the affections of thy heart be placed upon the Lord forever.
Wow.
I think that's...
Well, isn't that a beautiful meditation?
Yeah. Isn't that
like to repeat in it, right? Like all the thoughts. Like, tell me that verse again.
It's Alma 37:36.
I'm going to write it with this area so I can go back to it.
I have multiple times gone back to this verse, especially in a hard time. Like you're saying, when I just have to take my heart.
Yeah.
Take your heart, Lord. Right? That's what it is. And for me, it was, I'm taking all of the emotion, I'm taking all the pain, all the suffering, and literally, as it says here, place the affections of thy heart. And I just put it on the altar and say, Heavenly Father, I cannot handle anymore, and I don't know what to do, and so I have one choice, and it is, I've got to turn it over to you, or I am going to be very black or very hurt. And then you trust the Lord.
Yeah. And then he miraculously fixes your heart.
He does.
And that's the amazing thing is, like, I just feel like sometimes we just want to hold it, and we don't, like, just turn it over. And even for the little things, I just have constant reminding myself, like, okay, like, ask him. Because if I'm having a hard time, sometimes I get, like, if I'm having bad feelings about someone or something that happened, and I'm like, just give it to him.
Yes.
Like, that's what and you forget. I don't know.
And I think the practicality of this, some people would say, how do you give it to him?
For me, it's a temple. And we're so blessed because we live in Utah and have this access. But if I can get to the temple, which I typically can, that's where I'll go. And my heart is just restored. I feel like peace, and I don't know if I've told you this, but my husband and I, because you got married later too.
Yeah.
But I was 35, he was 38, and he was single for all these years. And it was just not easy for us.
Yeah.
But like all of the feelings just change when you go to the temple. And so whatever it is you're feeling, like envy, anger, you name it, right? Not enough, it's that, to me, that's my secret weapon.
I want to share this. This is actually from Heber J. Grant, and he's talking about these enemies in the world, but especially in the church.
Yeah.
And he says this: our enemies have never done anything that has injured this work of God, and they never will. I look around, I read, I reflect, and I ask the question, where are the men of influence, of power and prestige who have worked against the Latter-day Saints? Where is the reputation for honor and courage of the governors of Missouri and Illinois? Where are the people to do them honor? They cannot be found. Where are the men who have assailed this work? Where is their influence? They have faded away like dew before the sun. We need have no fears, we Latter-day Saints. God will continue to sustain this work. He will sustain the right if we are loyal, if we are true, if we are worthy of this gospel, of which God has given us a testimony. There is no danger that the world can ever injure us. We can never be injured, my brethren and sisters, by any mortals except ourselves.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that great?
And it reminds me of what Christ, where it's like the lesson we learned with the feeding of the 5,000. It's like, you just bring the fishes and the loaves. Like,
Yes.
I got the hard part. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
he's got the rest of it.
To bring this kind of full circle, we do hope that in confounding your enemies, as it's saying here, that we do take these experiences to the Lord. The road from between now and the second coming of Jesus Christ is not going to be easier.
No.
And it's not like people are just going to forget.
No.
We're going to have our work cut out for us.
Well, and Matthew 10 says we're going to be persecuted.
Yes.
Like, Jesus Christ tells like the disciples, hey, like, spoiler alert, right?
Yes.
It's not going to be easy for you, and it won't be easy for us until he comes.
Absolutely.
We know that. I mean, that's just very clear. And the Doctrine Covenants makes it clear too. We know.
Yes. And President Nelson has asked us to be leaders in
That's right.
peacemaking, right?
That's
So
right.
it's not even just peacemakers. We need to learn how to lead in being a
Yes.
peacemaker,
That's
which
right.
that takes it to a whole nother level.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to this next topic.
Yes, and this is the will of the Lord.
The will of the Lord.
I love this. So section 72, I think, is a good focus on this one as we're moving along. And we learned that, we learned before that Edward Partridge was the first bishop of the church. And now we see Newell K. Whitney being called. And I love this. So, we talk about the role of the bishop. And he says in verse 8, 72:8, and now verily I say unto you, my servant Newell K. Whitney is the man who shall be appointed and ordained unto this power. And I love this part. This is the will of the Lord your God, your Redeemer, even so, amen. And that's not the end of it. And then he keeps going. And I just love thinking about the bishop, who the Lord calls as his bishops or his Relief Society presidents or whoever, as the will of the Lord. And I wanted to tell you a couple insights I had on this, the stories that came to mind. So I remember one of my college roommates, Jamie, I was talking to her about this, and neither her or her husband have had any big callings in the church, but they've been in the same ward for a long time. And I was like, like, how did you feel when your last bishop got called? I said to her, and she said, well, it was the will of the Lord. And like, so matter of fact, it's not been the will of the Lord for my husband and I to serve in that way. And I was like, wow, that's exactly what I thought of when I saw this. I'm like, and some people, and my husband's that way too. He's very like, he just understands the will of the Lord. And I remember recently, my Relief Society president that just got called this summer, our current one, and I asked her if I could share the story. She said it's okay. Her name's Ange. She got up and bore her testimony, and it was one of those. She was just like, no one's shocked, but she's shocked. She's just like, I don't know how I'm here. Like, honestly, and I don't know why she thought that, but for whatever reason, she felt not worthy, not the right pick, whatever it was. What has happened since that point? So she got called to be the Relief Society president, not the bishop, but basically hand in hand, she works with the bishop on everything, on the needs and the welfare of the ward. And there's a woman in our ward that moved in, and her daughter has this special disease that's like 0.0007% of people in the world have. And Ange is able to talk to her. She has somehow, in her past experience with her own daughter years ago, like 15 years ago, researched everything about this disease.
Oh my goodness.
And knows everything, like the workup, like she's able to diagnose it. She also works at the University of Utah, where I live, it's close to my ward, and is able to help this girl, and like miraculously. And Ange wouldn't have told me this, that my friend did, Isabel, that's in the ward. And it's incredible, right? Like, the will of the Lord was to call Ange Winters to be our Relief Society president because she was the only one. And how would she have ever known, right? Except for the bishop told her this family has, and this son is very sick. Like, he's in the hospital. He was very close to dying. And Ange was able to say, no, this isn't seizures. We don't give him the seizure medicine because that could have harmed him substantially. That would have been in the call. The call, it was, no, it's this disease that 0.007% of people have. And so if anyone, I'm just saying that for anyone that doubts, or I know there's people, and I know, President Emily Bell Freeman shared on Inklings that for a time before she got her call, there was like 15 years where she didn't have a position of leadership. And you think of how capable she is, right?
Totally.
It's not about capability.
Right.
It's about the will of the Lord.
Yes.
And so if any women are out there that watch you, and I'm sure like lots of dedicated, amazing women that are just like, why am I not getting called? Like, the will of the Lord is what it is. And it's like, sometimes it's to be Ange Winters to be the Relief Society president. Sometimes it's Newell Whitney to be the bishop. And you just don't know why things happen the way they are. And sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't, as to the end of the story.
Oh, yeah. Newell K. Whitney himself, I was just reading this. He says this when he is called, I cannot see a bishop in myself, Brother Joseph, But if you say it's the Lord's will, I'll try.
Oh.
And then Joseph replies, you need not take my word alone. Go and ask Father for yourself.
Oh, I love that.
And then he says, Newell wrote, as he prayed, the Lord did strengthen me.
Wow.
I mean, that's
incredible.
It's exactly what you're talking about. And, there have been times when I've thought, really?
That's why I'm saying it, because I'm prideful and I probably have done it more than you have. But I'm just saying, like, it's a check of your pride. It's like,
oh, it is.
It's the will of the Lord. It's the will of the Lord. You got to trust.
There was one time when I was a teenager, that I just remember this moment because you said it. So my dad he was never a bishop. He was never in any leadership positions. And then when I was a teenager, all of a sudden he was called to be in a stake presidency, and then they were releasing the stake president, and they'd taken everything out of his office and things, and we're all just sitting there, and the next thing I hear, I'm at the back of the stake center, and I hear this, Al Morgan is called as the stake president, but she might like.
You were like, what?
Totally, to me, it was totally out of the blue. But the funny thing is, this woman sitting in front of us goes, you've got to be kidding.
And you heard it. You're sitting right
I heard it.
Oh,
my mom heard it. She reached up and tapped her shoulder. It was just this, but I think we were all feeling that, like, Al Morgan's going to be the stake president.
Thought the same thing. Wow.
He has all these noisy kids back there and all this stuff going on. He's never been a bishop. He didn't have anything. And all of a sudden he's...
Wow.
And I would imagine, and to be very frank, I would imagine there were probably a number of people in there thinking, what have we just got? You know?
Totally.
And I know, just like Newell K. Whitney, that he and us in many positions... We're not trying to seek these positions. And I think this is absolutely critical for us to understand. It is easy sometimes to be negative or find fault in the Lord's anointed.
Yes. Right.
They are not, no one applied and no one got paid.
But they're the will of the Lord. And it's so funny that you said that, because the stake president thing, so, I mean, maybe some people don't know this, but general authorities will go out to call a new stake president. It's a very big deal. And what I've heard a couple of them talk about this process, because they love it when they're assigned to do this, because they really get to see, and so it's like, I think it's a general authority and then area authority. There's a few people that get to decide, but they're all not in the stake and don't know the people. But they'll go through these interviews, and all of them, like I've only talked to 2 general authorities about this, but both of them have said, this is like, it was so clear the will of the Lord. Like, it's almost like they could tell in the minute they started sitting down with this person, before they heard anything, any background, and that's remarkable.
It is
right.
Remarkable.
Like, the Lord will lead His church, and His will will be clear. And maybe it's not clear to me and you when your dad's called, but it's like, I'm sure you saw afterwards why it was the will of the Lord. Like, why do you think it was that your dad was called? I'm sure there's 100 reasons, but like,
I can tell you on a personal note, I needed my dad to have that calling so that he could teach me about the atonement of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
I can, I don't know about the rest of the stake and the rest of the ward and the rest of the family, but when I was going on a mission and I had to talk to my dad and receive a temple recommending and receive a mission call, and to sit there eye to eye, knee to knee with my dad and repent and feel love, I got that from my dad.
Wow.
And that taught me about the Father and the Savior.
Wow.
So for me personally, he probably got called for a lot of other reasons, but for this little daughter, he got called so he could teach me about the Savior.
And God would do it just for that, if that was the only reason. But I'm sure there were thousands of people. There were thousands that he touched.
I would imagine that's the case. He's a good man.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have to say, because we're talking about Newell K. Whitney, this is what his wife Anne wrote as far as them joining the church. She said, it was midnight. My husband and I were in our house at Kirtland, praying to the Father to be shown the way that the Spirit rested upon us, and a cloud overshadowed the house. A solemn awe pervaded us. We saw the cloud and felt the Spirit of the Lord. Then we heard a voice out of the cloud saying, prepare ye to receive the word of the Lord, for it is coming. At this we marveled greatly, but from the moment we knew that the word of the Lord was coming to Kirtland.
Wow.
I just love that from the wife, too. I mean, we're talking about the bishop in here.
She gets the witness, too, because it's, I've never been a bishop's wife, but one of my best friends has, and it's like, it's as much work for her as for him. So, they both need to be on board, and it seems like she had a beautiful spiritual experience herself.
There was a day a few years ago when I was walking. It was actually just behind this house. There's an elementary school that's not too far from here. And I was walking up the hill, and as I was walking up the hill, I saw 3 little kids going across the street in their scooters. And there's a little girl in her scooter. That's the part I remember the most. They looked like they were probably siblings, but could have been friends. But this little girl was going across, and all of a sudden she fell in the middle of the street, right? In the crosswalk. She was walking in the crosswalk. And as she fell, there was a car that pulled up, saw her fall, and just stopped, right? I saw another car come up right behind this first car. And the car behind the first car just started honking the horn.
Like not getting what's happening.
Clearly, because he saw the other kids go, didn't see, obviously, this other girl that was laying there, right? And the girl is down here crying and just, trying to get up, but really slow about it. And then the third car comes and starts honking the horn. And you could tell that they thought, I mean, from my observation, it seemed as if they were saying, get off your cell phone. The kids are already gone. Like, go. Like, we're all just sitting here and they're waiting. And I've thought about this in so many times. The very clear impression I had at that moment is, it depends on where you're sitting. Your seat matters, right? And I've thought about this in terms of a bishop and in church leaders or a Relief Society president or a mother or a father or the prophet.
Right.
The seat that you sit in matters.
Right.
Sometimes we can be the second or the third car, right?
Yeah.
And the second car doesn't realize what's happening, but the third car is actually listening to the second car and doesn't even have any context. He's just honking because the other person's honking.
Right.
But then I think if that car in front, or in this case, if a bishop, if a leader listens to those people in back, they may kill a child. They may lose a person. And so I just think about this in terms of, as we are supporting these bishops, and I recognize in Section 72, there are all these duties of these bishops that are mentioned. One of the ones that to me stands out is that they are laboring. And I recognize that not everyone's perfect, and we have these leaders, but I would just throw out there again. Support them in their labors.
I know. And you don't have a good vision of everything. I obviously never have been bishop, but I've been Relief Society president, and the view of my ward that completely changed overnight, where you just kind of think everyone's just doing great. And then you learn, everyone has really serious challenges. Everyone, everyone. I just think, having that perspective of what's going on? Let me just be more trying to figure out what's going on rather than going to honk, which I know I'm guilty of all the time too.
Yes.
I'm just being impatient. It's I know what's happening, where you're no, you don't know what's happening. Somebody might be dying and you have to be careful.
So what about callings? How do you know your calling is the will of the Lord?
I just think you have to do your best to fulfill that calling. And I think the only way we know if we're following our stewardship, there's so much stewardship talk in these last chapters and this one. You lay all things before the bishop in Zion. And right now we don't lay up our crops and our hats and whatever we're making, but we do lay up all things. And so sometimes I just think of, the bishop and the Relief Society president and all the leaders and what they're holding. And it's what can I do to help that? And so I know, when I'm not doing all the things I should be doing, I think I'm making their load greater if I'm not ministering in the right ways, checking on people. And just, I don't know if this is something that you have experienced too, but I've experienced more than just when I was Relief Society president, but also in the last few years, everyone needs to be ministered to.
Yes,
everyone. Even if it's the bishop's wife, everyone needs it. There's no one to be excluded from this. And there's that way for a reason, right? And anyway, the more I learn that, it's nobody just needs a treat. And I think I'm guilty of that because I love treats. So I do love when people drop me off treats, but people do need to be checked in on. And how are you doing?
And I think you're pointing, this is kind of the administrative points of this, but in verse 17, a certificate from the judge or bishop in this part of the vineyard unto the bishop of Zion renders every man acceptable. There is an actual logical administrative function of leadership and the church and the way things are organized. And we're done by geography. And we actually say, we have our church records and there actually is a bishop or a stake president or a Relief Society president, et cetera, who has stewardship over a specific group of people. And these records do matter.
Right.
When I was serving,
and the people matter. I want to hear your story and then I have a thought too.
Well, I was just saying, when I was serving as an institute director out in Boston, it was interesting. Sometimes I'd get phone calls and emails and text messages from parents that I didn't know, just saying, hey, have you found, or how's my son or how's my daughter doing? And I would have to respond and say, I am so sorry. I don't have any record of them.
Right.
I recognize they're your son or daughter, but as far as I know,
they weren't listed on your...
They're not here. I don't know. And I'll just throw out for people who are traveling or people who are going to universities or in different places as you're leaving, I would encourage you yourself to make sure your records are going with you. But also parents, if you can help your youth and young adults, we lose too many. And if we could just practically help them to say, let's move our records to Boston or to California or wherever they're moving to, keep the records with them so that they can have the person who actually has the stewardship.
So someone can minister to them when they need it.
So they can be ministered to.
Yeah, it's so important. I love that. So the thought I had was in verse 12, where it says that this also may be consecrated to the good of the church, to the poor and the needy. And there's a lot in the Doctrine and Covenants and the Book of Mormon about the poor and kind of like dealing with that. And I think about how we're charged now. We're still under the obligation to consecrate, right?
Yeah.
We covenant in the temple to do so. And I just think the ward unit, the way it's done, wards and stakes, like it's such a beautiful, easy way to do that, because you think of like, okay, like, can I take care of this 200 people, 300, whatever numbers.
Yeah.
I know there's one ward with 800 people I've heard. I'm like, that's a lot. But like most of us have a few hundred people, and it's like, can I take care of them? And something I learned from my husband, which was so thoughtful of him. I've never heard anyone do that, because you're not in these meetings. So, we got married, right? I'm 35, he's 38. Like, he's been going to church a long time, but he had a regular practice. Every time he went for his the tithing settlement interview, he would always say, Bishop, like, and if he was in a financial place to do so, he'd say, Bishop, is there anyone in the ward that's dealing with like debt or any kind of issues that I could financially kind of secretly whatever help with? And I was like, oh, that's such a beautiful way to do consecration, because we give tithing, we give fast offerings, but if you are in a position to give more, and some people are, like, is that something we could do to take care of the poor and needy? You know what I mean? I just thought that was such a beautiful thing that is just called out so many times. And that's our stewardship, right? You might not be the bishop, but if you have enough to give extra, like, right? It's like bringing your surplus to the bishop. Like, can you give that to me seems like Zion, right? Where everyone's helping each other that can. Like, if you have more, and it's all by free choice. It's not like no one's forcing us to give anything anymore, but I just love the gospel way. And I feel like growing up, that's what we had. That's why we survived in the church, and in general, is like people, somebody showed up in our house and saw we didn't have furniture, and they're like, oh, like, we could help you get to DI. This is a couple years after we joined the church, and get furniture. And we were like, what? Like, we could get furniture, and we just had no money. We couldn't bring any of our money from Iran. And so we just were living on, just mattresses we found on the side of the road. Like, that's how we grew up. And then through the church, DI, we got our first beds, and we just like cherished them. So anyway, I just think of like, this is what we do. We take care of each other. We take care of the poor and needy. And sometimes you're the poor and needy, and sometimes you're the people helping. And it could change in your life. And I think of my life, like, I was a poor and needy, and now I'm in a position where, we could be able to be more helpful.
Giving and receiving is a covenant relationship, right? And you're telling that story, Shima. And now you're in a position where you are genuinely saving people. Right? I mean, God is, but you were in a position, you're an instrument in the Lord's hands, where at one point, really not too long ago, you were estranged, and you were lonely, and you were in a world that you didn't know, and joining a church that was brand new to you, refuge.
We left everything. Imagine this, Barbara. They came to the U.S. with $10,000. Most of that they used to buy a car. And so you imagine living for a year with your family in L.A. in 1986, with $10,000, and he's not getting paid for his job. I mean, it's like, it was what it was. So we didn't have furniture and clothes, and it's like through the church, through the love of the members of our church and their consecration, their fast offerings, like, we survived and thrived. Now eventually they ended up thriving, but.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Isn't it President Uchtdorf that talked about that? Yeah. Being a refuge and just saying, we are so grateful, right? Yes. And do this talks to these refugees.
Yes, I know.
And isn't it true that we're all refugees in one way or another?
Oh, yeah. Anyway? Spiritual or temporal, either way. Yeah. That's so good.
Shima, thank you. Honestly, we could talk about this forever as well. I do want to say, at the end of verse 26, where it just says, otherwise, he who shall go up into the land of Zion shall not be accounted as a wise steward. But earlier, he says, verse 22, that they also may render themselves approved in all things and be accounted as a wise steward. And just this idea of it being a privilege to go up to Zion and to be a part of this vineyard and to be a wise steward, and the difference between wise and not wise. I think we've talked so much about these wise virgins and the difference between the wise and the foolish.
Yes.
The wise man who builds his house upon the rock is the one who is obedient.
Right.
The foolish man does not, right?
Wow.
The wise virgins are those who know God.
Right.
So the foolish do not know God, the wise do know God, and the wise act like God.
And they also recognize all their good came from God.
Yes.
That's wisdom, right? It's like, this is my stewardship. Right? I'm just stewarding over all the blessings he gave me. None of this is mine. I didn't create this. I didn't create my wealth. I didn't create the miracles that brought my family out of Iran. We're just wise stewards over. I love that you pointed that out. It didn't come out to me the first time. I love that. Yes. Wise stewards.
Wise stewards. I'm going to
over God's goodness and his blessings.
Yes. Speaking of, let's go to our last topic today, which is labor ye in my vineyard.
Yes.
And I think this has particular focus on what you've been talking about.
Yes. I just love this. Child. I mean, section 75 just hits us so hard. So, verse 2, hearken, O ye who have given your names to go forth to proclaim my gospel and to prune my vineyard. And then he says, behold, I say unto you, it is my will that you should go forth and not tarry, neither be idle, but labor with all your might. And then it talks about kind of lifting up your voice with the sound of a triumph, proclaiming the truth. And I just think there's such a beauty in that. And I'd love to hear your story on this, but we both kind of preach the gospel to whoever can hear pretty publicly and with a lot of negativity. Both of us, I'm sure, have had it over the years, but I've done it for less time than you, I think. I've only done it for a couple of years, but I remember I was a law professor at the University of Utah, and I was praying starting during COVID, like, what can I do? I felt like the work of the Lord was hastening, and the prophet keep telling us, right? The time is coming towards, we're getting closer to the coming of the Lord. And even last conference, he just said, it's coming closer. I'm not saying when, but it's coming closer. And we know that, and we can see the signs. And anyway, I started praying, what can I do to build his kingdom better? And the prompting I got was to get online and get on TikTok and then Instagram and start preaching about the gospel and trying to talk about Christ, bringing people to Christ that might not have access. And I don't think you're on TikTok, are you?
I'm not.
Okay. It has an algorithm. It's been a little weird with all the Chinese stuff, but initially when I first got on in 2022, they would send your post to like a couple thousand people that you didn't know. So it was a really good missionary tool. Yeah. And so when I started, it was just kind of talking about Christ and trying to unify Christians. And then I got on Instagram and started talking more about it. But I just feel like so strongly that, this work, this Doctrine and Covenants, is almost like a manual for our time. Yeah. Where we're kind of taught what we're supposed to do in the latter days, right? Yes. Like the early saints are just exemplifying for us what we still need to do, which is to proclaim the gospel, to keep talking. And something that's not lost on me is, all four gospels include, and then also Third Nephi, talk very clearly about going out to all the nations, baptizing, preach the gospel to every creature. And it's like, how do we expedite that? Well, online. And, Elder Bednar's talked about this more than anybody, I think, but he just says, look, people are on social media. Like, that's our water well nowadays, right? You used to go to the water well to hang out and hear what's new. It's like, this is where people are spending their time, good, like it or not. And I'm curious your story. I'm sure you've told it 100 times, but how did you even get online? Because neither of us are very likely people to get online, right? Like, I had banned Instagram from my house. I was like, no, I don't even want it. I was off of it.
I've said on this podcast before, I am like a lioness at this gate. Like, I am very careful about what comes in this house and what goes out of this house, I hope. But so I've been very careful, and I've been careful with Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all those things.
Everything.
I was riding the exercise bike at the gym. The girls were over at swim team, right? And I was just exercising the bike and reading something, I don't know. And all of a sudden, I was listening to and reading. It was Elder Bednar. So you just said this.
Okay.
This is Elder where it starts. Yes. And so I'm pedaling along, and I turn on, it was Roots Tech. And he has a Roots Tech talk. Yes. From I think years ago, probably. And
he did a follow-up recently.
Yes, he did.
Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So I'm just cycling along, kind of looking, reading, and listening to him at the same time. And all of a sudden he says, flood the earth.
Yes. Oh, that's what it was? So was it 2014 when you got on?
Well, no.
Or 2017, when was it?
No, I didn't get on until I think my first accounts I started doing this like 2 years ago. Not that long.
So we both started
about the same time.
Ago,
Okay. So, but here's the thing. I remember just kind of being like, oh, I wish I would have done that. Yeah. I wish I would have. I looked at the date, 2014, and I remember hearing this.
So it's like, we feel like, okay, well, I wish I would have done that. Yes. Too bad I didn't move along.
Okay, this is the deal. No, this is what happened. A distinct impression.
Wow.
If you would have done it when you first felt like you should have, you would have been way further along than you are now. It was
a little scolding.
Yeah, it was a loving, right? A little reproof.
Come on, Barbara.
Yes, and that's what it was. And so I sat there. I mean, I'm like stopping, like a cold stop on this exercise bike, which I wasn't going very fast in the first place, but still, it was a cold stop. But I was like,
oh wow,
I have to make a complete fool of myself and get online.
I know.
That's what it felt like.
It really is. And my poor kids.
Yes, I know.
I don't even know how old my oldest son was. It was 2 years ago. He was 18, and then my others, and it's like their friends are like, oh gosh, what is your mom doing? And it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
But guess what? Like, so many blessings. And I want you to share, because I know you don't share this on the show, but like, you've seen letters. You see daily letters.
All the time.
But I get stuff all the time too. It's like, you posted this thing, and it's like something I forwarded from the church. It's not like, I'm not always creating new content. You're doing like the heavy lifting with your podcast. But like, even for me, as like a regular member of the church, right? I'll do what I can. Sometimes I appear on podcasts or I'll share other people's things, but it doesn't have to be your own content. is what, Elder Bednar says. It's like,
yes.
just share
Just
something
share it.
that touched your heart, because it might really make someone else's day and really keep their faith. Like, I shared something with someone, and I remember she said to me, she said, I was thinking about leaving faith today. Like, today was one of those days where I was just like, I'm done. And you sent this thing, so it's like, you never know, and you might not even hear some of the non-written letters.
Yes.
There's probably like 100 non-written letters that you're not even getting.
One of my all-time favorites was, Dustin and I often will do like a little thing on Wednesday nights at the temple. We just go to the temple, we just kind of...
That's your date night.
Yeah, it's our date night, and we come,
sweet.
After we leave the temple, we try to do a little post on
Yes,
just because
I love your temple post. That's how I know him, right? I saw him today, I was like, oh, they're sweet.
And we really think about, like, what's the thing that we need to be posting today? What was funny one day, and it wasn't even planned to do it that way. We just started, then people started commenting. We're like, well, if we're helping, we'll just keep doing it. If it's helping people, then by all means, then we'll just keep doing a temple post.
Yeah.
But we went to this reunion, and this girl she was a friend of mine since I was in elementary school, not a member of the church at all, no interest as far as I know in the church, but she's followed me, and I was feeling a little bit embarrassed, like
that she followed you.
Well, the thing is, like I went from just kind of being a Facebook with whatever, like Facebook I've been doing for years, but then all of a sudden I'm like, everything's the church and so much, and all about Jesus, exactly, Jesus and temples and family, like that's what it is.
Yes.
And then she said, I love every time I get on my Instagram account, I just love the invitations you give me, and I love seeing your bright, happy eyes. And I was like totally taken back by it. I mean, that's
amazing.
These are my Oregon friends, you know what I mean? And
she's not a member, she's not even.
No. And my concern was that I might be offensive because I was so in your face, and I've been so, nothing could have been further from the truth.
I actually recently started, you know how you can click the thing on Instagram where it just automatically posts to Facebook? Because Facebook, I can't deal with like 3 social medias. I already have TikTok and Instagram, but it automatically, and I've noticed like some high school friends who are not members liking certain posts, and I'm like, oh, it like makes a difference because you grew up with these people and they know who you are, but like then they really get to know what you believe, and it could help them. And I
absolutely.
I just think of like the uplifting. Think of her feed, and maybe you're the only uplifting thing in her whole feed.
Yes.
Could be.
It could very easily be.
Right.
Going back into 75, since we're talking about this incredible missionary work.
Yeah.
I love, we're talking William McClellan, and there's a lot we get to be talking about there, but I love in verse 11, he just says, praying always that they faint not, and inasmuch as they do this, I will be with them even unto the end.
Yeah.
I appreciate, and this sounds a little bit strange to say this on this podcast, because it's for people on this podcast. I appreciate the notes that I get sometimes from people that just say, Barb, we're praying for you. Oh. And thank you so much for helping us get the word out. And we're praying for your ability to speak, or we're praying for your stamina. I get that from people. It is the most amazing
That's beautiful.
thing. It is.
You have really nice followers.
It's from time to time.
And a community of like lovely women.
But Shima, here's the thing, and it's me to you. Like there's a relationship that comes when you know that somebody else is putting themselves out there for the cause, right?
Yes.
And not that everyone has to get an Instagram account or a Facebook account.
No, it really is remarkable.
It is.
You know what I've seen that's so remarkable is like they are it's like we're in for this cause, and it's like to further the restored gospel of Jesus Christ and bring temples to dot the earth and bring the joy of the plan of happiness to all people. And I remember I have a student in my class who was really wanting to learn the gospel in Arabic at BYU. And I'm thinking, surely there's like hundreds of people that speak Arabic. Well, I went through the proper channels, I thought, like MTC, Presidency, and trying to find somebody, but like it doesn't work out with this person. And she's like texting me, and every week she's like, it's like 2 weeks that go by that she doesn't get to teach, and she has to go back home to Palestine. Yeah. So she's like desperate to learn the gospel, and I'm like, So anyway, I have this idea of posting on my Instagram, and I don't usually do stuff like that, but I post this quick story. Out of that story, Barb, like 20 different people come and write me and say, I have this person, and immediately find this person that goes like 3 days later to start teaching her. She learns all the discussions. She's deciding whether she's going to get baptized, but like she's asked this opportunity. And I'm like, that's the power of social media.
Yes, it is.
Just expands your pool. I mean, I've tried the regular methods, and I should have just gone straight to social media because like it's so much more powerful. And like we are on this team together, like these women that are praying for you. Like we are all on Jesus Christ team.
Yes.
Right? Like Team Jesus. And like they called their friends. Like everyone called everyone they knew that knew anything about Arabic and got me all these people. And there was like a backup list, like 10 people long, Barbara.
I believe
in Provo, willing to teach her like tomorrow. And I got messages for weeks after, like, did you find someone? Because I have someone else. I'm like, we got people. There's people when there wasn't anyone. It's remarkable though. It's like the work of the Lord, and it gives you this like energy. Don't you feel like?
Oh,
like,
totally.
Like I can't bear my testimony enough about how much bearing your testimony will give you strength.
Okay, Shima, you just reminded me of a student that I have that I'm going to share this story, because he actually asked me, and we're going to have to post it on our Instagram account.
Yeah.
His name is Riku. He is a BYU student right now. He came from Japan.
Okay.
And he was trying to decide what university he wanted to go to, and his parents basically said he can go anywhere in the world that he wanted to, but they limited him by saying, you cannot join any church.
Oh.
Right? Like, that's the one thing you can't do.
Interesting.
So he started looking to programs that had a good program in accounting. He did not know that BYU was a Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. He didn't have any context. He just saw that they were doing really well in their accounting program, which they are.
Top
right?
5 always. Yeah.
Always in the top 5.
Yep.
So he came to BYU with the intent of being an accountant and learning about accounting.
Little did he know.
Little did he know while he was here. But I'll tell you this, before he came, he actually told his parents, he said, I appreciate that you're telling me that I cannot join a church, but I am a truth seeker. And I want to know the truth. So if I go and I find the truth, then I need to have your blessing to be able to join that truth or at least learn more about it. Comes to BYU, and because of the kindness of the young adults that were his age, he starts becoming very interested in the gospel. And then he started taking the discussions. And long story short, he ends up getting baptized. And then he recently shared with me a little video that he did. He couldn't, his grandmother was passing away. His parents were I believe, agnostic. They didn't have any faith. And his grandmother was passing away, and he was trying to get back. He could not get back in time for her death. Wow. He didn't know that, but he was just trying so hard to get back there. So instead he wrote a letter, right? I'm just talking to his grandmother about the plan of salvation and all these beautiful things. And he invited his grandmother while she was at the end of her life to pray with him. And she just said, Grandma, I know you've never prayed before, but will you pray with me today? So he has this beautiful little video of him praying with his grandma, like days before she passes away, unbeknownst to him. And she's willing, and it's the most beautiful thing. And then he says, I was very upset that I wrote a letter to my grandma, and she died the day before she received the letter. And then he said, but the most beautiful thing about it was my father read the letter at the funeral, and for the first time in my city, people heard of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it was just this most beautiful, and he just says, we don't have to push, we don't have to pry, but we do need to love as the Savior loves, and we do need to find the truth for ourselves.
That's right.
It's the most beautiful young man sharing this experience.
You can't stop people that want to join, like...
It's the light in their eyes and the love in their heart,
it's the plan of happiness where we get to choose, and when this boy finds light, he can't get away from it.
And Shima, almost like how, as we started at the beginning, he's so grateful. He's so grateful. He actually asked, can you share this with the world? Here's my little video. Can you just put it on your Instagram account? Can you flood the earth with this? I will put it. Yes, I will. I'll share it on my Instagram account. It's just so beautiful. And he is so grateful for the gospel of Jesus Christ that he wants everyone to know about it.
But that's the thing. It's like when you haven't had it,
yes,
you just crave it. You need that light. And I felt the same way. I mean, I didn't know I needed it, but I did. And I just love it.
And may I throw something else out since we're on this topic? I will caution some of us sometimes, those of us who have been members of the church our whole lives and maybe aren't as grateful sometimes. I sometimes am not as grateful as I could be. To be very careful that we don't focus on the first world problems. That we be very careful that we focus on that we are grateful for the atonement of Jesus Christ and that we have a living prophet and that we have eternal families. And remember that so many people are hungering for that truth.
Well, and maybe that's what it is, though, because I think there's a reason why in all 4 Gospels and in 3 Nephi, God tells us, preach the word, repent, preach the gospel of repentance and baptism to every creature, like the doctrine of Christ. Like, we need to teach that to everyone, because I think when we focus on those essential truths, we don't have time to worry about the first world problems and the issues that we have and the questions that aren't answered that we don't get answered. Right?
No,
don't you feel like that's why he does it? And I think right after, Christ tells them to preach the gospel to every creature. In Matthew, he says, in 28:20, he said, I am with you always. And I just feel like that's how I feel. Like when I am doing his work, and like I don't know about you, but I've never regretted testifying of Jesus Christ. Never once regretted it, even if it didn't go well. Or the person didn't accept it, which is most of the time. Right? You're never going to regret it because he is with us always. There's this joy that you feel. And I do feel like, I've been going to the temple for a long time, but I actually have had my joy in the gospel even just magnified even more. And I don't know if you felt that way too the last couple of years. Like, and it's funny because we both entered the same space at the same time. Like, my joy is magnified when I preach the gospel. Because when I preach truth, like, light comes out of me, right? It can't help it.
Yes.
Because I know it's true. And it's like, they know it's true. Everyone knows the goodness. And it's all him. It's because he's with us always when we're doing his work.
And Shima, preaching the gospel outside and also preaching the gospel within. Preaching the gospel in our own families, preaching the gospel in our own neighborhoods.
Totally.
Like, we need this.
That's right.
We need each other. I need you, Shima, to post.
Yeah.
I mean, as silly as that sounds, I love it when I see it.
Me too.
We're all on the same team, right?
My feed is amazing, Barbara. I'm sure yours is too. But I probably have 100 women I follow that just put out light and truth and goodness, and you're one of them.
Yes.
And it's like, it gives me so much joy on a day when I'm down and feeling bad, because we're going to go through ups and downs in life.
Yeah.
And it's like, thank you, because God was with you that day, and I get to see him through you.
Yes. Verse 27 of section 75, it says, "Let them ask, and they shall receive. Knock, and it shall be opened unto them, and be known from on high, even by the Comforter, whither they shall go."
Oh.
So I love to do doctrines and principles. And if I were just to take this, I would say the doctrine, plan of salvation. Principle, preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the Lord will guide you in your own life where you should go. Application, well, what's your application? How are you personally going to be preaching the gospel to the world? To your family? Is it through social media? Is it through writing a letter? Is it through really focusing in on your family for this period of time? What is it that you can do? But I also invite to stretch a little bit more. Wherever you are, climb a little bit higher on that mountain, stretch your arm out a little bit more, do a little bit more to serve the Lord. Just as these early saints were doing a little bit more to move across the plains and to get the word out and defend the truth.
I love that so much. I love the couple verses up from that. I had circled the part where it says to open their hearts, where we have to open our hearts fully to the Lord. And I think about, how we started with our black hearts, right? Where things can just be dark, but what do we need to do? We need to open our hearts and let him heal us while we're doing good to others. And sometimes it's just loving others, like you said, or preaching within your home. But the more of his work that we can do, we see in the Doctrine and Covenants, like, the more happy we are, the more blessed we are. And I felt that I just have to testify of that myself, as, the more I try to do his work and less I focus on me and my goals and plans and my plans for my kids, which, as you know, well, you don't know yet because your kids are young, but as you get older, you don't get to decide for them anymore, and they make their plans, and then we get to feel what God feels like with us. It's like, oh, really? You're going to do that? And that's where, but it's like, just to open my heart to the Lord and allow him to have his will go through, and let my heart be healed through him. I just think I have such a strong testimony of that, the power of that.
Oh, thank you. And Shima, just to say thank you, we also have sponsors. We have the Gardner family especially. We've never mentioned them on this podcast, but I'm just going to mention them today. They have financially supported us and helped us in making decisions and things. And I'm grateful for their willingness to share the gospel throughout the world.
And they've opened their hearts and their checkbooks.
Absolutely.
Which is part of it, right?
Difference. 100%. Yeah. It's a big part of it.
I'm so grateful. I didn't know that that's how you got online, because you have a team, Barb.
Yeah, we have a team.
You have a good team. And it's like, thank you to this family that was consecrating their money and time and all the things.
Exactly. And I think that's what it's saying in verses 24 through the end here, is that there are those who are supporting other people. It says that in verse 24. It says, "Behold, I say unto you that it is the duty of the church to assist in supporting the families of those, and also to support the families of those who are called and must needs be sent into the world to proclaim the gospel into the world."
Yeah.
And in this case, it's not a calling for me to be doing this, but it's not a specific calling from the Lord, but it's a calling from
the Lord. It's a calling from the Lord. It just didn't come from the bishop.
Not an official.
It's an additional calling.
That's right. It's an additional calling.
What's your other calling? I'm sure.
Well, we have
You have all the different callings.
But how beautiful it is that there are people with time and talents and treasures, whatever it is, and that they can support this work in the Lord. Everyone has a way that they can support everyone.
That's right, everyone. I agree.
So Shima, in finishing this off, I just want to ask you, what are some of the things, or maybe just one thing, we finish off with this, what is one thing that has really stood out to you as you have studied these sections?
Number 10 is the first one. Calling on the name of the Lord for the Comforter, which shall teach them all things that are expedient to them. I just felt so, that word I circled, and it comes up again later, even by the Comforter. And I know it's referring to the Holy Ghost, but I just love that term for the Holy Ghost, because that is what gives us this peace to keep going. And I had this incredible experience, Barb, just barely on my way back from that interfaith conference I was telling you. I happened to sit by a guy on this plane who told me this beautiful story where he got this debilitating illness. It's called tinnitus in his ear, where he just can't, like, he's basically hearing this ringing constantly.
Yeah.
And he said he prayed to the Lord. He was like, Lord, like I feel like an animal. Like, I want to die. Like, I just want to die because it's so horrible. And he said that he felt this voice that said, like, you know, basically in so many words, like, I did this because I wanted you to come close to me. And he just was like, okay. And he's really turned his life in this more beautiful ways than he could have, you know, he was already living a good life, but just even more to that. And I just think of like that comfort that even within, you know, I'm sure a lot of people that you're listening to, I have a best friend who has this, like, have chronic illness or pain or different things that they're going through that aren't going away, but that the Lord has this comfort for us. And I do think the Doctrine and Covenants, because they went through so much pain, has this like spirit of comfort for those of us that struggle. And like, think of our age demographic, Barb, like, it's like that's, and any women, like, there's different struggles for different ages of women. And I think that comforter to me just speaks to my soul, that comforter is there to help me know that Christ is with me always.
Oh, that is so good. Shima, thank you. And I know he is always there. And I know that we are here to comfort each other.
Yes.
That's one of the purposes, honestly, of this podcast, is that we can comfort each other and build and strengthen each other. Shima, thank you for opening your mouth today. Thank you for being such a great ambassador of the Lord and all that you do.
Oh,
thank you in your professional life as well for helping so many people and defending the truth.
Oh,
we need you. And teaching the truth. We need you. We need each
you.
other, right?
Yes,
we all need each other.
I'm grateful for you.
Thank you. And to you, our wonderful listeners and audience viewers, we need you. We need each other. We'll say that again. To build up the gospel in your own kingdom, to spread the gospel throughout the world. We do recognize that sometimes it's hard to do that, but we together invite you to stretch a little bit and continue on this great path of shouting the gospel to the world. Speak up and speak out. We appreciate you joining with us today on Grounded, and we'll see you next week.